Welcome back, Visions fans. This is the first, hopefully, of many of the Leonis report. I'm here with JB79, and this is a podcast that we're hoping to do a week in and a week out. It's something we've talked about for months now. You know, oftentimes we want to talk more about the game and our content. We get to do a video or two a week, but there's a bunch to cover in terms of just what gets released every week, in and out of job upgrades and new maps and future-looking things that there just isn't time to cover it all. And it'd be kind of cool to just shoot the breeze and get to talk about this and have you guys hear it. So very excited to kick this off. JB, obviously, really cool to be here with.
Yeah, so like this all kind of started out when I kind of reached out to Will on a whim, like around Christmas time, and said, "Hey, I've had this idea of kind of doing this year-end kind of review of 2022." We did it live, and it was a lot of fun, and we kind of had a good rapport. Kind of, we've always kind of chatted here and there on Discord and things about units and what's going on in the game. So I kind of said, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" It's something that's I've been interested in, and then yeah, I think you said right back, that's something I've been wanting to do too. So that's kind of where things started, and here we are a couple months later and kicking it off. So super excited to kind of get this going, and yeah, like Will said, kind of give you guys a little bit different take, different flavor from the normal stuff that we do, and maybe a little bit more raw, a little bit maybe a little bit more fun, and so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. So we've kind of got things set up into four sections here. You probably see it at the top in the agenda. Very creatively named by Jay here. The Battlegrounds of Ardra is really supposed to be more like PvP, some impressions of things we're hearing about, game modes. The second one there, the War Room, is a little more X's and O's, kind of map analyses, unit reviews, talking about the meta, really just anything that comes out that affects that. And then the third one, Leonis Spy Report, is more future-looking things. So as we get the new releases in JP, kind of digesting the stuff that we hear live alongside that as well. And then finally, the Leonis Town Square. We're going to eventually really lean into this. This is more for an open Q&A where you, as fans, if you want to submit questions or topics to us, do it either in the comment section, reach out to us on Discord, really anywhere you can. We'd love to take questions and answers, or I'm sorry, questions and give you answers for anything you want to cover. So looking forward to dedicating some time to that. Kick
Yes,
things
that,
off here.
that
Yeah.
should be like a fun way to kind of make it a little more interactive. And people are asking questions on Discord all the time. I pop in there, and it's fun to kind of share knowledge. That's one of the reasons why I think probably both of us started our channel. That'll be perfect for that.
Definitely. I know, third anniversary coming around the corner. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people either returning or brand new. And, some of those questions we don't often think to ask, hopefully get some of those and get to cover them here again and go over
I hope
some
so.
stuff.
I hope that there's going to be some new folks coming in. Been a little bit rough time for the game,
Yep.
but I think that there was some of that going on at first year anniversary. I think anytime you're in these gotcha games and like a tier jump is coming in, that kind of gives some people like, a little bit reason to kind of jump, people that have been on the fence. Because I mean, to be honest, it is going to be a more expensive time for the game that they always are, especially if you're like in that competitive mindset. So
Yep.
hopefully some people will come back, old players will come back too. And the game's a lot better than it used to be, in my view. It's a lot more generous in some ways. Obviously it's less generous than others, but overall, like I think it's much cheaper than it used to be, in my view.
I'd agree with that. Now, this game's come a long way. So, all right. Well, good. We'll kick things off here. We do have a lineup of topics here for everybody. The first one, JB, if you want to talk a little bit about the Battlegrounds of Ardra here and get into the first couple topics.
Yeah, so the first thing that's kind of it's going to be going away this week, but the defend the gates mode, it was a new PVE mode that came into the game. That's kind of my jam. Like I like to get in there for the score attack modes. I've always loved guild raids, Trials of Reckoning. So this was kind of along that same lines. It had the same Trials of Reckoning kind of scoring sheet. The sort of main difference there was that there was no bonus units. You weren't locked into any certain units to kind of maximize your score, which I think actually made it a little bit better. Like it was more free form, like you could be more creative with your teams. And the fact that the enemies keep spawning and they don't have a ton of health kind of eliminated a lot of the cheese that goes on in some of the trials modes where, people are lowering bravery and trying to like ramp up huge chains and stuff like that, which that whole part of trials is something that I wish Gumi would do something about it because it's really ruining that mode. But this one, yeah, this kind of naturally eliminated a lot of that stuff, and I really enjoyed it. Last time I checked, I was still in the top 10. I don't know if that changed today, but I might need to get in there and try to grab a few more points.
Dude, and for you guys listening, last week we were going to cover this, right, on Sunday, and JB reaches out and he's like, you know what, I'll be honest, I haven't really even looked at the mode yet, and I'll give it some time this afternoon, I guess. So within like 30 minutes of trying, he was already ranked 14 on the ladder, like near instantly. So yeah, his bread and butter for sure. I think I've fallen. I was at like 50 on like the first couple days, and now I'm in the 300s. But it's a good game mode. I actually wish to do more of it because quite often we kind of get the same rinse and repeat of content, and I feel like we spend more time talking about the characters than actually getting to use them, right? So getting some
Yeah.
cool PVE modes like this to, and as you mentioned, there's no bonus unit, so it's really whoever you want to use. And sure, if you want to maximize your score, you have to have certain units, but there's definitely more than one way to do things here with, I think we talked about Espers and getting the apparels that they bring, and just a lot of different ways to get that high score that I think allows people to have that creativity they don't normally get in some of the Trials of Reckoning, where you get the bonus units and you just have to work around it.
So I mean, I guess this will air tomorrow, so I'll go into a little bit of my strategy here. But I've been using a water team, and I'm utilizing Amnelis and her TMR to really amp up the speed of the Esper summon, and that's kind of the core of my strategy.
I love that. Do,
And
do you
then
spam a couple different espers then, like to multi-imperil? Or do you just imperil once and then it's set?
just the field effect, right? So I'm using Siren, and that gives the 50% water to the field. And what that does is once that field is in place, every enemy coming in is going to have a 50%, I believe, water imperil. So that's going to then allow you to get element weakness scores on the score sheet. Whereas, prior to that field imperil being out, only if like I was hitting a fire enemy would I get that. So at that point, then I'm just trying to also hit the damage type weakness of the different mobs. So, some are weak to pierce, some are magic, some are slash. So you got to try to bring a combination of units that can not only kill them quickly and not run out of AP, but also try to hit those particular damage type. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Do you notice any enemies hitting the gate when you play? I saw someone post a strat on Reddit of that you can protect and shell the gate itself, which I thought was really creative.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So basically, there is a line on the score sheet also for damage taken, and that includes the gate, because that takes a lot more damage than your units do, like to the enemy's attacks. The gate has 999 hate. I don't know if you inspected it at all. So like, no matter what you do, you can't get hate away from the gate. Yeah, I've optimized my strategy to where the gate just takes very minimal damage or zero damage.
Nice.
So that's kind of how I've tried to manage that.
All right, well, we'll see what ends up happening. I'm sure people make videos at the end of it to see what they did, but obviously, I think yours is pretty sound from the Esper strategy, and Water's obviously got a ton of weapon attack types. So good luck. Hopefully, maintain that top 10.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see how it goes.
All right, so then topic number 2 here. You want to talk about the map a little bit? Castle Interior 3.
Yeah, so kind of the second topic for Battlegrounds, we actually did get a new map this week with Castle Interior 3. So far, so good. It seems to want to favor Rulgia here with the missile attack and the earth attack. So it can really get a pretty big bump on his damage. But at the same time, you're also bumping up, ice missile, and that comp has just been so oppressive for a while now. It's got kind of an interesting layout. It's kind of wider than it is long. Usually that doesn't favor missile as much because you can kind of get across, those 10 to 12 length maps, you can get across them a little bit quicker. This one, though, has kind of choke points that make it a little bit more difficult for you to do so. So it is actually a very good missile map in my view, especially, as you head towards the middle where there's kind of the natural obstacles there that you can't really get by. And then the units can't get by, if your own unit, especially if you've limited their movement to 2, like in the Laya, or maybe like with the producer's bow tie or something like that. So that seems to have been pretty effective. I've been using my wind team quite a bit. That's kind of my catch-all team. It does well against pretty much everything except ice. Glassy is just too good. I'm not worried about Rugia this week.
Not at all. I was actually very happy to see the results of this map. To your point, when they said missile attack up, I was almost dreading the ice meta to come in again. And one of the reasons why not that I don't like that, but there really is no defense against it because of how many imperils and penetration they have, that you can do as much missile resistance as you want or ice resistance as you want, and they're just going to imperil you and end up doing the damage they want to do anyways. But this map actually has been pretty balanced, at least speaking from the top 10 even, we've seen a lot of different lightning walls, despite the earth attack up, or the earth, and missile attack type up for them. We've seen ice, obviously, but there is still a fair amount of fire and wind hybrid as well. It's been very well rounded. We just ran dark wall. I know Lukavi did too, so it's good to see that this map does have some balance. That, to your point, yeah, it's a missile type attack, but there are so many choke points here through the middle that enemies can't really just go from point A to B, and that range of 12, because they can't just go from A to B, they really do have to kind of like take the long way and move kind of up and down here visually. And yeah, honestly, this is one of my more favorite maps in a while. I was very concerned about these giant black squares, which are non-traversable. I know there was a map like 2 maps ago where essentially that line was blocked off and characters would do weird things. They'd kind of like go one way, then they'd stop and go back the other way depending upon where the enemy was, and you'd kind of get some weird movement. But this map is very fluid, so big thumbs up for this. I actually have used Rulgia a fair amount. We'll segue to that in just a minute here, but he's definitely doing well on this map for those that can leverage him.
So like in terms of like your hate placement, what do you like to use here? Because like there's a couple of different kind of avenues you can go to. You can I mean, just kind of from my own kind of playing around with it, you can go for like one of the slots, like 1 or 3, and that kind of can drag, like the enemy slot 3 and 2 kind of into a crossfire for your middle slot, or like you can just put it in the middle. I think it's more of a safe play, because you'll have the enemy slots will be drawn towards the middle. So what do you think about that?
I've personally been going with slot 1 here so far, if only because I feel like the pathing that you take, and you can see there's more of this like wide open flat space here on that side. I like to have that tank kind of start here on the first half of the map. I'll usually take the slot 3 unit, have them go buff slot 2, and then just kind of have them hang back and kind of follow up the rear, as opposed to having this, slot 3 unit kind of either move too far ahead on their own or get too far ahead of the tank, because obviously tanks tend to be a little bit slower. But I've found some pretty good results with slot 1 so far. And more than anything, having the team kind of hang back as really helps. So even just having sometimes go for that like, circular buff motion around slot 2, even if there's a tank nearby, has worked well, just because you can kind of bait enemies into your range.
Yeah. The slot 3 is kind of interesting too, because it starts 1 slot ahead of the other of slot 1 and 2. You can kind of use that to your advantage too, where you can have that unit come into your slot 2 and bring them back on their first turn, which is that, that's advantageous for some, especially long range units like a Jaden or things like that. And then they're also blocked by that middle area, so they kind of will naturally kind of stay in that area, because as the enemy comes in, they're going to be in range, and
Yep.
they have no real reason to kind of move forward. So
Exactly.
that's kind of a pretty interesting position.
Yeah. Nope. This is a good one. Big thumbs up.
Yeah. So also this week we do have the porcelain tower coming back, and to be honest, tower really needs a revamp. If I'm being real, I think most of the veterans out there, I think you will agree. At this point, for us, it's you set it on auto, and it's kind of a chore, especially getting through so many floors, because you need to. Not only do you need to finish the new 10 floors, but then you need to crawl all the way up 90, 100 floors now for the latest one. So, to have enough materials there to finish the latest ring. In this case, I'm willing to put in the work, because this one is the Umbral Ring is coming in. This one is going to be for the dark element. So this is finally they're getting their own ring. Light was the very first one that we got way back when, and that has kind of been one of the pegs that the light element has had over dark for a while now. So that's now kind of evened things out here this week. Yeah, so you got 20 light resistance and then the 15 dark resistance on there. It does have a debuff to your evasion. So, I mean, don't put it on an evade unit, but aside from that, this is going to be essential gear, I think, with Sephiroth coming into the game. People are going to be wanting to put together light parties to try to take him down. Obviously, that's not going to be the best strategy, because Sephiroth innately does have light resistance. He has 20%, I believe. And this is going to bring him right up to 40%, and that's pretty crazy.
It is.
Especially with not very many options for light and perils in the light element. Lucio and Summer.
Kilf, I think. No, one of the things that I appreciate about some of these dark units that have come out recently is a lot of them have one kind of typeless attack in there, so that you can bypass things like the element resistance, where it doesn't scale off that. But I don't think light has that benefit where Jaden and
No.
Elena don't really have any type attacks, so this dark resistance is going to be a hard wall for them to kind of get over. And to your point, there is no imperil either, so you really have no way to get around it other than I really don't know, just like chaining, and I really don't know if there's not a way to do it other than smart with your AI.
I think like you could look at somebody like Sakura who has the lightning attack that's actually pretty powerful.
Yeah,
It has an apparel on it as well.
man, she's so
Um,
squishy though, and without having that 140 to
yeah,
compete, you're gonna get him at 140. I don't see her standing up very long.
that's the problem. So
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
gonna I don't even know if she can take one hit. So
No,
I mean, I guess if you really start that dark resist, which I have done before, I have been able to get her up to 70, 80%. And there's not a lot of dark imperils either. So Sephiroth doesn't have a non-elemental attack, but the mages do. So that's kind of what you need to really watch out for.
definitely. And the decreased evasion rate, I'm not that scared of that anymore. There was a time where Dark was a lot more evasion focused, and they still kind of are with Knight of Ruinstern. Joker is another pseudo evade unit, but I'm not too worried about the decrease in that. Overall, this is a well overdue accessory. Obviously, these rings are huge for so many pieces of content in terms of just allowing people to stand up longer. I know these are big in Arena just for making sure that you can kind of like find that element that you want to counter and just auto and skip and farm off them. But even in auto PvP and Guild Wars, we quite frequently have these rings on just because there's so much more than what you can get from the Truststone passives. And they do stack with those vision cards and other kinds of Esper resistances. So, love to have this extra source of it.
So, I mean, the thing about this is that at least, if when I'm planning on putting Sephiroth on defense, this is going to be a key item. I mean, there is also a cloak coming in with the Final Fantasy VII raid or the trial or something. I think it's Yuffie's cloak, and that's
Yes.
also pretty interesting. We'll probably look at that a little bit later, but that's also got some all element resistance on there, which is super good for him.
Yep.
So he is a unit. I mean, I'm not gonna. I guess I don't want to spoil him too much, but he's gonna be a hard nut to crack. I think with all the element resistance that you can kind of play around with him.
Totally. At least for the first month, just having that
Yeah.
immediate power creep into what he brings. Yeah, there's going to be a month where it's just going to be him everywhere.
So yeah, definitely get the tower completed. I think that pretty much everybody out there is going to want to grab this one.
All right, so that ends the Battlegrounds of Arja. We're moving now on to the War Room, where we're going to be covering a little bit about Rulgia and the first week impressions. We'll look at the Pursuer Vision card that's coming out a couple days now. That goes well with him, seemingly so. The Crystal Chronicles Vision card that just came out. Is it worth talking a little bit about its value? And then just talking very briefly about some of the job updates that we just got announced as well. So, yeah, Rulgia first week impressions. I've used him in like 2 or 3 Guild Wars. I'm actually running him in Arena today because he's that bonus unit. I just came out with the review. I gave him a B overall. He does have some niches that he shines in. I don't think he's going to be a super consistent unit, but I've gotten really good results from him so far this week. Obviously, this map is a massive offensive boost for him, not only for the missile attack and the earth attack, but just as we're talking about, the map strategy is perfect for what he brings as a unit. Lightning in particular, he actually does really well against those Skahal teams. He's got that follow-up attack on one of the EX abilities that Skahal coverage is a lot easier to neuter and kind of just get lucky and have that follow-up attack hit. Yeah, overall, Earth is in a tough spot, kind of, we know that, but you go one step at a time. You have to introduce a unit like this, kind of like Queen Mashri when she came out. It's like, all right, we got a magic user, but like no vision cards for magic, and it's really hard to fit her in. But over time, as you continue to get these units, the full picture becomes a lot more clear. And obviously, he's one of the units that'll get the 140 upgrade relatively soon. So that's a nice feather in his cap as well to look forward to. So yeah, I've enjoyed using him. Probably be short lived, but we'll see what happens. How about you? Anything you've seen?
So what team have you been using with him?
So I actually go evade so far. I've been running Immortals as on, and then I'll use Rulgia, and then I'll use Resnick the Hoppy, where I'll do this kind of blend of evasion, and he actually can evade a hit or two depending upon the accuracy of the enemy. And they just I've had them turtle up pretty well to start, and then they all move out together, and there's just I don't know, it just works. It's hard to describe, but the regen is so good on those evade
Yeah.
units that for those first 3 turns, if they take a hit from like let's say a sharpshooter or something like that, that regen to kind of give them that little bit of health back, really awesome.
Yeah, so my Rugi is done too, and I was actually plowing through Arena today too. I used a couple pot refreshes, and Yeah, surprisingly, there was a number of lightning teams. I didn't finally check the bonus units, but maybe there's a bonus in there for them. Maybe that's why. I guess some of the water stuff is still on bonus, so they're trying to kill the water teams. You really have to push his damage, I found, to one shot like a well-built Skahal, or even more so on like a uh, yeah, Summer Helena. I don't know if you faced many of those, but I found there was a lot of cases, even though I thought like I built him pretty well for damage, I had full trust stones built out, I had offensive cards. He would still slightly just not one shot the Helena, and he'd have to like hit her, and then the follow up would then proc the courage instead of taking her out in one turn. So I really had to like push the damage just a little bit more. I had to go for like, attack based TMRs, and all this. Had to make sure he's maybe getting an attack buff in there, and then yeah, he could easily. Skahal was much less of a problem, but obviously he's got like the Ryryu team on the TMR on there if you're
Right.
going like full toxic builds. And then of course Resnick's just sitting there standing still healing
And
all the
the
time.
physical shield, just give him the physical shield, and yeah, unless you have the
Uh,
barrier breaker on the sniper, you won't get through
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's
No,
so it's such a mistake, that unit. Like every time I face him, it's just like, man, this unit is just. I can't believe they brought him to global that way. But yeah,
if I may, I'll give you two tips for what I've succeeded. So, or I'll give everyone two tips, not just you, for what I've done to maximize that damage. He's actually the first unit I've ever made an attack trust stone set with, for like set bonus on the right side. Now the attack percentage buff not enormous, but an extra 10 defense penetration. And I have been pairing it with the Muscatoon TMR. That's the hate down. So I really have been like maxing the attack stat from the trust stones on that weapon. But I've also been using the Sortilege accessory, which although his limit break gives him the attack buff, the sortilege giving the attack buff on critical hit has also been really awesome. So my go-to at the moment is Thornlet accessory, sortilege, and then the Muscatoon. And that way, at least like the Thornlet has that 20 defense penetration. It also has the agility down on crit, which he crits quite frequently, and on that AoE attack that helps. And then obviously the sortilege does its attack buff too. So I think that's like my sweet spot so far for min maxing his damage.
I like the jeweled belt too. I
Mm,
don't,
yes.
yeah, because he's not taking hits, especially on this map. Like unless it's things you're done basically if he's starting to take hits on that side of the map.
Yeah, his AP management is stellar. On my arena team right now, like by the time he gets his turn, he's already at like, I'm sorry, before he starts attacking, he's at like 140 AP. It's insane.
So the team that I've been using is kind of built a little bit. I really have been like trying to like Exodia working. So like I'm trying to get like all the pieces in so that he become like this super tank. And it kind of works. Like so I have Mashari comes over, brings him protect. Rugia comes over, brings him regen. Then I have Moraga pop Summer Kill Phase TMR for the shell. And then he's like ready to go. He's got the barrier already, physical barrier. He's got like 80 defense.
Yep.
Um, and then Summer Helena comes and removes my shell and it pops me anyway. So
So my arena team, I've been obviously anticipating wind units to kind of come around in the top like 100 or so. I've so far been running Winter Ravies, Velis, and Rugia, and essentially I'll have Winter Ravies come over to Velis first turn. She'll use her physical buff and like the pierce whatever. I'm sorry, physical shield. Do that.
Mhm.
Rugia will come over use the AOE regen, and then Velis will haste what's her name, Ravias. And then Ravias, because I have her subvision card as her own subvision card that grants her the magic barrier. She'll go grant the magic barrier, and then like it just kind of like she does a great job tanking and obviously like frontlining. And she's got the AOE barrier break, and she's got courage as well that she'll use, and she's got the regen and the Velos healing. It's just awesome so far.
Yeah, she's a good unit.
Yep, definitely underrated for the cost. Those JP units that got pulled forward too soon.
But she her 140 is going to make her quite a bit more tankier. She gets like a bunch of defense and some single target resist. So
Wait, Winter Ravias or regular Ravias?
Winter Rabies.
She has a one. I actually didn't know that. I didn't know she got a 140 already.
She came to JP. The trend or dream as they call it
Right.
over there was already in place. So she got that right away, and they kind of brought us kind of the nerfed version here.
That's
The
right.
problem is like on the normal schedule, we would be looking at her like maybe sometime in April, if we were following it exactly as JP. But as we've kind of seen with the winter units in the past, they've kind of have gotten boned like when it comes to Mastery 2s and EXs. Think back to like Winter Victora.
Oh yeah,
Uh, she was supposed to be our King Mont killer back when he first came into the game, and that never happened.
yeah. There's a very small window where that worked, but we will move on though. Just talking about missile units here, where the Pursuer Vision card is coming out this week, and I'll share this on my screen in just a moment here. Yeah, this card. I like it. I don't love it. This obviously works really well for Rulgia, where I do think he does well against some more magic-oriented teams. He's got that innate magic resistance, and the lack of defense penetration means that, I've said this in my video, when you're in a magic meta, people won't gear for defense as much, so it won't be as much of a problem for him. So this card, though, crit rate 20, obviously he's got a high enough crit rate. It's nice, not amazing. The magic res is cool. The missile attack is cool. I think the biggest downer, and you mentioned this when we were talking last week, is that it's limited to like gun units and not inclusive of the bow units, and that's
Yeah.
kind of a big L that you've omitted half that cast of missile, where you lose out on that synergy. So
It's one of the things that makes it feel like super limiting. Like missile attack is a card that, yeah, you're specifically looking on it for a certain subset of units, and the fact that there's so few of them, on the card, those gun units that yeah, this is, I think, for the majority of players, it's like a big skip.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean
It's permanent.
yeah,
People will get it eventually. We have a couple of missile attack cards in the game. We have like the Luartha one,
yep,
which has like some unit resist, and it's a pretty decent. And then you have the Frederica's Dream, which is it matches the 35 missile attack here.
does.
So really what you're missing there, obviously, this one has much better base stats. It has agility. This one has much better bestowed, and then it has that magic resistant crit. So, I mean, maybe it can be kind of cool for like an ice missile team, like Barrett and Elia are on there. You would be, at that point you'd be using like Barrett as your tank, because there's really no tanks, that really benefit from this card, kind of scanning through the units here,
No.
which could be interesting actually. Barrett with his 140. I talked about this in my recent video, but yeah, he can be a decent tank, I think, at 140. Obviously, he's not going to take a ton of hits, but he's going to get courage, and he gets a bunch of area resist and pretty big amount of hit points as well. So
Yep.
I think it's something that could work. Maybe you could throw like Elia and, I don't know, Zoma on there, maybe kind of a funky ice team.
I'm still trying to get out of that mono element. Force a square peg in a circle hole too. There's got to come to a
Yeah.
point where you're like, and this is the way I kind of feel about a lot of these vision cards. One of the things that makes them difficult is that they're inherently not going to benefit all three units. And to be fair, I think that's like a false expectation we should have to. And a great example would be Brachiosaur for fire, right? Like you have what, Cetia? That's really like the main missile unit used for fire. You don't normally have two missile units in your fire team, but you have that card working anyway. So, to the extent that, not everyone gets the missile attack, no big deal, but you still get some crit rate and magic resistance. At the end of the day, like, you got to kind of pick and choose which units you want to
Yeah.
invest the stat in. And I think it's too often that we kind of get hard focused on, all right, all three units have to get it, and all three units have to, be that same type. And practically speaking, that doesn't seem to have to be the case, but regardless, I'm with you. This card's probably an easy skip just because it's permanent pool, and I don't think it really changes anything that doesn't already exist.
100%, like what we were saying. If you can get 2 out of 3 in the party effect, I think you're doing pretty well there. If you can get all three, then that's kind of just gravy.
All right, cool. So then, on the note of the vision cards, we also had the Crystal Chronicles vision card rerun this week to the surprise of many. This was a card that a lot of people wanted for quite some time. Looking backward and saying, hey, Fire Attack 35. This is a card that a lot of people during the drought of lack of fire vision cards really wanted this, and now we finally got it. What are your initial thoughts to it?
Yeah, so this was one of like 2 items in the game that I didn't have. Like when this card came out, like I pull like on almost every banner. So like for me to skip this, like and a lot of people did, to be honest, back then, because we had no view at that point into the mono elemental meta. Even on the JP side, it hadn't come yet. It was pre first anniversary. I think this card came in I want to say it was somewhere like around like half year anniversary for us, maybe a little bit afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had the fire attack, and it's really like a magic centric card, like with the base stats and some of the effects on it. Which like at that time we still didn't even have one of the best users for the card at that time, which would have been uh, Summer Catone. So
Absolutely.
basically, you could use it on Rain at that point, and Rain at that point had really fallen out of favor because we were into kind of our first evade meta, or maybe even the second one by that point. You know, Stern, and Halloween Leela wasn't following too far after him. So
Yep.
yeah, a lot of people were just like, there's no use for fire. Like, there's no good fire units. Like, why am I going to use this?
Yep.
Really niche card. But in retrospect, it's really at this point I've really been missing it from like a PvE perspective and really trying to push like guild raid scores and things like that. So I went and pulled it for that because I've really have wanted it for that reason. Unfortunately, the banner was really bad.
Horrible. Yeah.
No bingo board and like yeah, like no login shards or anything for it, no tickets to like maybe get a few shards. Thankfully I got a dupe like while I was doing the step up, so that helped a little bit. But otherwise it was like, compared to other vision cards, they just made it painful and expensive to build, so that was kind of a bummer.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I had to go through the shop refreshes, and I had some of it built already, but not enough. I still had to, spend the viz for it. I'm glad they reran the card. It's just probably a little too late for most people. But to your point, PVE wise, this is an exceptional card for fire. That fire attack 35 is a very strong modifier to put on a main slot in a team of 5. We're talking about PvP modes. Yeah, this is kind of past. Just given that we're at the stage now where you really need that unit AoE or 15% agility as your main card. So when you think about the applications of this in a sub slot, that fire attack 35 doesn't get its full value. So the modifier itself isn't game changing. And that fire resistance at 20%, really good for arena, in my opinion. That'll get cut in half to 10%. So for those that do, want to compete in arena and just throw a team on a heavy fire week and have that extra resistance, that will sway many of your battles. Outside of that, I'm going to see like niche PvP, and I say that only from the perspective that there is still kind of like an impending fire meta coming with obviously Psaro right now, but when Yuffie comes out and Valentine Eldyra is obviously very strong, that fire will have its time to shine. So I could see some applications where if you're really scouting your enemies hard, that 10% fire resistance is cool, but that's really the biggest strength here. It's no longer that fire attack 35 from a PvP perspective. So
Yeah, you could totally create kind of like a super niche like fight fire with fire team. Because you do have the fire ring, which does also give fire resistance of 15%. So, and then King Mont always, he's got the omni element resistance.
that's
So
right.
you could maybe create like a null fire King Mont with that card, so that maybe that's kind of interesting.
You couldn't. I don't know the Esper off the top of my head that would have the fire resistance to go with it, but you're right. You'd come pretty darn close.
It's Death Machine gives 25.
A fire resistance. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's super odd. So it's like really like the anti Setia Esper with the 25 missile and 25 fire or
That's right.
whatever.
So either way, I'm glad they reran it. I'm always a fan of rerunning these cards, particularly for new players, if you will. That might be one of my, let's say, bigger critiques in the game at the moment, where there's, we want this game to be friendly to new players, and having a lot of these vision cards be so time limited obviously leaves a lot to be desired for when they come on. Now, obviously, they wouldn't pull for everything, and most of us would probably recommend that they don't pull for this card. But regardless, just to have that recurring opportunity, I think is important. That yeah, nice that they did this. We'll see if they do it again in the future.
Yeah, I hope that they'll. So another card I think that came around the same time, the Mobius card. It was a wind card for missile resistance, and then later on it added the HP.
Yep.
That I didn't pull for that one either. So I do hope that they release that one. I think that one actually does have some nice uses for it still.
So that was during the time of the game where I didn't realize how good vision cards were, and I didn't know how important maxing them was. So I think I like this in Crystal Chronicles I had, but they're at like level 70 or 85 or something.
Cards were brutal to max back then. Like you had to like we didn't have whimsy shards back then, so it was pure like shop refreshes. Like you got there was no bingos. Like
Nope.
so yeah, that was pretty bad. It was really hard to max them. Like if like whales would just pull dupes of the card and that was how they maxed them.
Yep. Plus, at the time, we didn't know of the, or there was a window of time where we didn't know of the mono element additional buffs that vision cards were going to get. I remember specifically thinking about the Ramza light vision card, where obviously everyone that didn't get it was kicking themselves for the lack of 15% agility. But then we find out that light units get that slash attack up. We get this Elena meta, and I'm kicking myself every single day that I don't have this Ramza card that has the slash attack up for light, because back then I didn't know that light was going to be so prevalent and like getting that buff on that vision card, and nor did I think we would ever get like dual vision cards, right? So like all of a sudden the emphasis on how important they were just skyrocketed. Good. All right.
Well,
So
hopefully you rectified that situation with the Final Fantasy Tactics a few months
yes,
ago.
yes, I'm at the point now. I literally don't skip any. I mean, I don't skip anything anyway, but I definitely do not skip vision cards. And I think the meme in VIP is we call the game. It's not War of the Visions. It's a War of the Vision cards.
Yeah, not untrue.
So, all right, and then that lets us segue to the last topic here for the War Room, which is the job updates that are coming this week for many of the older jobs, and I'll share them here in just a moment. You know, there's a bunch, and these are obviously really great that they keep introducing these. I'm a big fan where there's so many 100 cost units and so many unique jobs that a lot of these, like, I don't know, vanilla, like day one jobs, they just kind of get left in the dust for how impactful the abilities are. So being able to kind of splatter some extra buffs in here is really good. This is a good week. It's I wouldn't say the strongest week, but I think there's a couple here that I really like. And I know I should.
There's quite a few jobs coming in. There's like 4 or 5,
There
right?
is, yeah. The time mage just kicking this off. I know most of these, at least for PVE content, will probably get far more usage. I know that you typically see things through that lens, but I look at a lot of these. I think most characters that are time mages are in the support role. So from an auto perspective, like this upgrade to meteor and to stop and to immobilize don't really get utilized all that often, at least in auto. Probably a totally different ballgame in PVE though, is it?
In PVE
I'm sorry.
you
I'm sorry for manual PvP. I'm sorry.
or manual? Yeah, manual. Yeah, time majors come out all the time. I think in terms of like meteor and stuff, not so much because like the most popular quickeners are usually like MRs that don't take up too much cost.
Yep.
But the additional use on quicken is definitely pretty big. Like there's definitely been a ton of matches I've played where just having one more quicken to use, could have made the difference. So that's certainly pretty interesting.
Same. And from an even auto perspective, like when you think of Guild Wars, you get that. I mean, you aim for one fight and then a second fight. So if your first fight relies on 2 quickens, now you have the opportunity to mirror that in a second fight. That's actually a really big buff that you can
Yeah,
repeat that turn order, however that may be.
yeah, they hooked up time mage a little bit. I think they pretty much all of the skill is like at least some kind of adjustment.
Yep.
Uh, Haste there that you have up, getting defense is pretty cool. But I think it's almost like I noticed that in the last updates, Red Mage got updated, and they also got haste, and theirs also gives defense or something like that. So it's almost like Red Mage are the best haster now.
No, this is good. I like the slow counter range upgrade here too, where you figure again most of these are mage units. If you're 2 squares away, you're probably dead. Not that you're not dead if you're 3 squares away, but just having that smidge extra range obviously is nice to kind of like sway the fight given the distance you usually want between your units. But yeah, that's what I really have to say for time mage.
Paladin, have not been a huge fan of the updates. The one thing that I was really wanting them to do was second cast of Immortal Spirit,
Agreed.
and
No,
they
so
did update Immortal Spirit to give it some status resistances there, which is like kind of whatever.
mhm,
It's not really ones that are really even
yeah.
meta at all, get seen that often. So yeah, that's kind of a throwaway. The other thing I wanted to see was that reduced AP on Taunting Blade.
Yes.
So that's pretty nice.
That's my big takeaway here. I love this because not that we've kind of gone by the characters that use Taunting Blade. There was a time where that was a huge staple to characters actually performing their tanking ability. That being said, it's still a viable thing. Like I just said, I was using Immortal Zazan in Guild Wars, and he's got Taunting Blade on because I want him to be an evade tank. Like the fact that you can now use this for 32 AP is actually a very big buff to all characters that are kind of those pseudo tanks that are trying to draw that aggro. So I like that. It used to be you would use this ability, and then you'd be dead in the water. You'd have to just basic attack. and it just completely sucks the winds out of your sails. So I like this a lot for that reason.
Well, even Zazan, like that's like his only AoE attack, like unless you use his main job sub.
Yeah,
So and it's a 200 modifier, like so it does quite a bit of damage for him.
yep,
So yeah, and he's a unit that unless you're running bells or something, like he's constantly running out of AP. So
yep.
that's a nice little kind of buff for him there.
Definitely. And then I just want to circle back real quickly. I do like the Saintly Wall one here. I am a sucker for crit evade in this game. I think it's like one of the more underutilized math equations where people discount how much damage they take from critical hits. So if you are
Hmm.
using a character that's anticipating taking damage, right, this is like one of the sneaky best ways to take less of it. But I love the third usage, particularly for some of these characters that when you think of a tank that's like a little slower, I think like Engelbert as an example, where you would actually you might use Saintly Wall twice before you even get to your enemies. Like that's not unheard of. Or if there's an enemy evade team and your tank can't hit them because they're too inaccurate, they'll just self buff in turn. So getting this third usage, I think, does help a lot for again those second fights where you used to blow two of these in one fight and that it completely changes your second fight. So I do think that's a sneaky good one too. I think
The other thing I wanted to see for Paladin was for Taunting Blade. I wanted Taunting Blade to reduce the defense penetration of the targets.
oh, that'd be a good one.
Um, I think that would have been super good because like the units that have it that are out there, like we almost never see it come. Like the only one really is Halloween Lucia, but for light it would be a pretty big deal because they have a lot
Huge.
of high defense units. I mean Engelbert in particular, like him being able to lower 30 defense pen of a few targets with Taunting Blade, that's gonna be massive for him.
And not for nothing, defense pen's kind of got out of control. Like it really has. There's a lot of units that can quite frequently get 80 to 100 defense penetration, and it's just like, what's the point? You know what I mean? We get these vision cards. Golem. We're gonna talk about Dark Golem. Defense is on the card, and it's one of those things. It's like, all right, you get 12 defense, but if you get a unit that has 80 defense penetration, like that's kind of useless. Like it's tough to swallow. But either way, we'll keep moving along here. We're, the pugilist. Any big thoughts here?
I made a post about this today. The I've been excited about the Demon Purger upgrade like for ever since I saw it like months ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I can use Urel, I can use Raldor, and you know pop somebody and get a bunch of health back. So yeah, I did like a little analysis of kind of the effects of this with snow and like with healing power. Um, in like a normal setup for snow, you're going to be somewhere like between 20 to 30 healing power, and this is a 30% absorb. So that becomes, anywhere between 36 to 39%, at that point, depending on how much healing power you have.
Yep.
And Snow is a guy that, I've seen him do 7, 8K with this particular skill, like to finish somebody off.
Like
So like that's another 3K that, he can potentially heal there in the mid fight, which is pretty nutty when you think about it, because
this.
he already has so already. So like to counter that guy, you really need that healing buff on him.
I would agree. I love it. Yeah, this is one of those jobs where ever since the game started, they described it as like a brawler class. And I'll be honest, I never really felt like it was that way. I never felt these classes lived up to the hype of like sustain and just like being able to fight for long periods of time and draw resources. Like all these pugilists and fist users, they go down in like 2 to 3 hits. It's no more or less than anyone else. So to get this form of self sustain, in addition to I think what was another one here? Like unit attack res on the pugilistic mastery buff. There's a couple things here that are like it's the right move for this job. Spirit Breaker having a little extra range. Obviously, pugilists are very short range, which makes sense. You know, they fight with their fists. They should be kind of, more up close and personal. But
Unfortunately, those pugilists had to suffer with one of the worst jobs in the game for the better part of 2 years, but finally they got upgraded.
finally, there's a lot of them too. There is a lot of pugilist sub jobs. In the
Yeah.
game, they've included that a lot more. So yeah, curious to see how this works out. The Energist as the last one here.
This one was pretty minor, I think.
It was, but I do like the Twin Chi Rupture. So this one decreases AP consumption, which is important because these energists don't get the full 75% AP that other mages do. The third
Yeah.
use obviously is really strong. I know this is like I think it's a shorter range attack, so it's not ideal, but still to be able to destroy a magic barrier. There's so many barriers in the game at the moment that that's just a really nice way to potentially just cleave through what enemies are doing. I'm a big fan of what they did for Flare for Black Mage and that same idea where it just breaks barriers.
Yeah, especially that on Twin Chi, because that is a big, I think it's like 250 mod. It's like XL,
It
so
is. And I am pretty sure off the top of my head, I think it's only like 2 squares away, so it's like too close for comfort, but still like this is a good upgrade. Uh,
Mhm.
and the chi barrier, I like this too for again that crit evade, where this is a typically a squishier unit, so being able to just make sure that you're not getting just blown out of the water by some big critical hit, I do like that in addition to what the barrier gives. So yeah, overall, I don't think it's gonna change a whole lot, but this actually is a decent buff for Garvor, and I think that wraps it up for the job updates, which that is the end of the second section.
Second section.
Yes, which now leads us into the Leonis spy report. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, JB.
Yeah, so pretty big news going on over in JP with Dialdo coming this past week. Finally, Earth has a tank. So this, I think some guys, I mean, people were kind of speculating this guy was going to be Earth based on the unit that was kind of found in game. That doesn't always come to pass though. Like, so, sometimes the elements have been different. A new tank unit, I think people have been wanting a tank for Earth for a long time. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Moraga. It takes a lot really to get him to work, unless you're specifically going against a physical team.
Right.
And then he's fine. But Dialdo, he has tools that are going to be very solid for both magical and physical. I haven't really deep dived into his kit. I haven't made my future look on him just yet, but kind of the initial cursory look is he's very flexible, like in the different things that he can do. Like he can be very mobile. He's got decent agility. He has huge hit points. You can build up defense or spirit. He's got counter reactions for either physical or magical. So I think you kind of got to do a blend of both, or you got to kind of cater to one or the other. But either way, like he's got the initial hate, he's got active hate. So he also has that chain resistance mechanic that came in with Alphonse.
I really need to
Uh,
study up on that. I've been waiting to test it myself because I obviously need to see the math like firsthand to see how that chain reduction works. But I got to imagine that's a big part of like survivability for these guys.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's something that maybe we can circle back on as it comes to global about it here, because people that I've talked to from the JP side, it's been a little bit underwhelming. Ended up being, somewhere between like 12 to 15% reduction, which is
Oh,
fine, like if it's on an active buff. But then you think about like that vision card that came out that also gives it, and it's like, okay, this is 35%. Like, okay, is that going to be like 5 to 7% damage reduction? Like if
right,
the chain applies, like
right.
that's super niche.
I'm gonna do a video on this too. I've been dying to do a chain damage video because it's actually very complex in like how
Yeah.
it actually ends up working. Well, it's complex to understand it and like translate it for someone else who doesn't really get into the numbers. So yeah, the chain reduction, very interested to see how we can like communicate that to the community.
But yeah, Dialdo, he's a magical piercing unit too, which is the other kind of interesting thing about him. He doesn't have much accuracy though, and he doesn't have offensive firepower either, even despite being like kind of like a hard damage to guard against. But he seems like he's kind of a brick wall, and Earth has a lot of good attackers, so I feel like that's kind of what they need. So
Totally. Yeah, without doing a super deep dive on him, I think my initial takeaway was that he reminded me of a Earth version of Charlotte, actually, in that he's a slower tank to ramp up and get going, but once you do, he gets to this full value, if you will, and really quickly, just kind of highlighting my thought process on that. For those of you that haven't seen it, the main skill here that he uses is Shell number one, defense of 20, but then debuff resistance of 50. So a lot of you might remember Charlotte has that same concept where, if you can prevent those imperils, that's a big part of your survivability. So obviously you get three different things here, but he also gains a new counter skill, and this counter skill it's a 50% chance to proc and reduces the physical damage by 30%. So that's basically a protect. Or 50% chance of proccing a protect. So again, when you consider Charlotte, where she had like that attract wall, it's a debuff resistance, she gets regen, and so the regen is on his limit break here. So kind of the same concept where you get that defense, get the shell, get this defense wall, then you regen, and then as you get closer, and then once you get him ramped up, it's really just like replenishing that health. So it's only 1 square away, but absorb 30% of the damage dump, but you get that healing power 20, and there's some other things here that make it really advantageous. But yeah, overall, I think he's the kind of tank that's gonna be a good addition to the Earthcast. We've obviously been looking for that.
yeah, I think like he's going to be really weak against Dispel though. I think is the one thing I'm worried about with him.
Yep.
Like he has all these great buffs, but one plink of like a debuff of a dispel, and then what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So either way, it's good to see that they did introduce a balance unit. I know we were just talking the other day. There was almost this sense of like impending doom, where when you look at the JP schedule and you think about like who you have to pull, given the power creep of like 140 and how good these units are, it's like man, like you don't get a break. Every unit looks so good coming out, and he does too. But it's nice to see a unit that's kind of just like yeah, there's some weaknesses. It's not a meta definer. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing him no matter what, particularly when they combine him with Dark Golem. So do you want to talk a little about Dark Golem? What we
Yeah,
know?
so Dark Golem, like obviously the data hasn't dropped for it yet. I think it's coming out maybe tomorrow in JP or the next day. But we have kind of like some teased details. It is going to be finally that Dark Esper that's going to allow Earth to combine forces with the Ice elements. So Earth does not need a support unit of their own. They can now just bring in Velis, which, to be honest, they could have done that already,
Yep.
and I know people do, but nice that he can now kind of, come together, with a little bit more power, due to the vision card. It has some area resist on there. It has some defense, and I think the third effect is going to be acquired AP. I'm most interested to see what the Esper is going to be all about.
Yes.
I would love to see maybe an Esper that maybe has something like single target resist on its board. I think that would be super cool. Uh, or maybe like a more defensive focused Esper. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen, one of those.
I think you just called it. Bold prediction. I'm gonna go with you. I think he's gonna have unit resistance. I do. I'm gonna go twofold here for evidence. Number one, if you look at Dialdo's kit, he is stocked like with unit resistance, like in so many different
Yeah.
ways. But then number two, there is a precedent with what's the Earth Esper, the magic oriented one.
Sheridan.
Sheridan
Yeah.
has
Was
AoE
it?
resistance on the board, so there is a precedent for having that kind of resistance on an Earth Esper that he might get that second one here.
I'm hoping that this golem has a little bit faster than the other one, though.
Yes.
One of the slowest espers in the game. Hopefully, he's going to be at least 15 to 17. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would imagine they're going to tailor make this Esper to go for Dialdo. Like you have to, right? That's kind of like the theme when a Vision card comes out the week after a new character. But yeah, either way, I'm a big fan of it for, if no other reason than the fact that you can now throw an Ice unit into your Earth team, which should help mitigate the threat of wind. That's really the biggest thing against Earth at the moment. It's just that rock, paper, scissors matchup is so easily exploited by wind that it's very dire to like gamble on Earth. But now the fact that you can weave in just either one ice unit or, like you said, Valence, just something. Obviously, we've seen this have great results so far with some of the other multi-element Espers, and this is another one that's much needed, and obviously great effect with the AoE resistance as well. That's really the biggest thing in my opinion. But the AP up, sneaky, good too. A lot of those Earth units are very hungry for AP.
One combo I was that I kind of like, just kind of looking at their kits. One combo I was really hyped for was Bradley and Reagan. I
Oh.
think that their kits have like synergized super well, and I was like, once Dark Golem comes in, that's going to make that a little more feasible. So I'm interested to see if people in JP try that out and how that goes.
Yep, I'm a big fan of these, particularly because this also I think it helps enable the job based vision cards too, where again everyone's trying to make them the job vision cards mono element, like it doesn't have to be the case. But the moment you get some of these vision cards where now you can have dual elements, makes the job based vision cards a lot more like palatable. That you can now mix
Yeah.
elements, not have to worry about mono element stuff. So yeah, big fan for this. Okay, and that brings us to our last section, which isn't really a section at all at the moment. It is the Leonis Town Square Q&A. No Q&A at the moment today, but please, very much looking forward to you guys submitting questions. Love to be able to build this section out to, obviously, in addition to the news updates and just talking about the game in general, we want to do something where to cover topics that you guys are really passionate about or want to learn more about as well. So looking forward to that, but that's all that we have at the moment for today. There's a lot to cover here. I think this is a really good first one. There's a lot of good things to look forward to coming with the third anniversary. So this is a nice little lull or calm before the storm, but yeah, that's all I got for today. JB, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so like Will was saying, this section, dedicated to you guys. So hit us up in the comments, let us know what you guys want us to talk about, and we will do that next week. Aside from that, though, this was super fun. I'm glad to finally kick this off. We've been talking about it for a while, so hopefully you guys out there enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something today, and hopefully you will stick with us for the next one. So we will see you next time.
That sounds good. And should be next Monday. I totally whiffed on saying that. Guys, our hope is for the cadence to be on Mondays recurring. That way we can cover a little bit of the week that's gone on and then talk about the news that day of. So look forward to that, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.